Chapter 2, A Merry Christmas. Joe was the first to wake in the gray dawn of Christmas morning. No stockings hung on the fireplace, and for the moment she felt terribly disappointed. Then she remembered her mother's promise, and slipping her hand under her pillow, drew out a little crimson-covered book. She knew it very well, for it was that beautiful old story of the best life ever lived, and Joe felt that it was a true guidebook for any pilgrim going on a long journey. Soon Meg, Beth, Amy woke to rummage to find their little books also. One was green-covered, another dove-colored, and the final blue. They each had the same picture inside and a few words written by Marmee, which made the girls one present very precious in their eyes. All sat looking at and talking about them while the east grew rosy with the coming day. "Girls," said Meg seriously, "Mother wants us to read and love and mind these books, and we must begin at once. I shall keep my book on the table here and read a little every morning as soon as I wake, for I know it will do me good and help me through the day." Then she opened her new book and began to read. Joe put her arm around her and, leaning cheek to cheek, read also, with the quiet expression so seldom seen on her restless face. "Come, Amy, let's do as they do. I'll help you with the hard words, and they'll explain things if we don't understand," whispered Beth, very much impressed by the pretty book and her sister's example. "I'm glad mine is blue," said Amy. And then the rooms were very still, while the pages were softly turned and the winter sunshine crept in to touch the bright heads and serious faces of the Christmas greetings. "Where is Mother?" asked Meg, as she and Joe ran down to thank her for her gifts a half an hour later. "Goodness only knows," replied Hannah, who had lived with the family since Meg was born, and was considered by them all as more of a friend than a servant. Some poor creetur came a-begging, and your mamma went straight off to see what was needed. There never was such a woman for forgiving any victuals and drink, clothes and fervorin'. She will be back soon, I think, so you fry your cakes and have everything ready," said Meg. "Why, where is Amy's bottle of cologne?" she added, as the little flask did not appear. "She took it out a minute ago and went off to put a ribbon on it, or some such notion," replied Joe, dancing about the room, taking the first stiffness off the new army slippers. "How nice my handkerchiefs look, don't they?" said Beth, looking proudly at somewhat uneven letters which cost her such labor. Then the door slammed and steps sounded in the hall. "There's Mother. Hide the basket, quick," cried Joe. Amy came in hastily and looked rather abashed when she saw her sisters waiting for her. "Where have you been, and what are you hiding behind your back?" "I went out to exchange the small bottle of cologne for a larger one. You see, I felt ashamed of my present after reading and talking about being good this morning, so I ran around the corner and changed it the minute I was up. I'm so glad, for mine is the handsome one now." Another bang on the street door sent the basket under the sofa, and the girls at the table eager for breakfast. "Merry Christmas, Marmee. Thank you for our books. We read some and mean to every day," they all cried in a chorus. "Merry Christmas, little daughters. I'm glad you began at once, and hope that you will keep on. But I want to say one word before we sit down. Not far away from here lies a poor woman with a little newborn baby. 6 children are huddled into one bed to keep from freezing, for they have no fire. They have nothing to eat, and the oldest boy came to tell me that they were all suffering hunger and cold. My girls, will you give them your breakfast as Christmas present?" They were all unusually hungry, having waited nearly an hour. For the moment no one spoke. Then Joe cried out, "I'm so glad you came before we began." "May I go and help carry the things to the poor little children?" asked Beth eagerly. "I shall take the cream and the muffins," added Amy heroically, giving up the article that she most liked. Meg was already covering the buckwheats and piling the bread into one big plate. "I thought you'd do it," said Mrs. March, smiling as if satisfied. "You shall all go and help me, and when we come back we will have bread and milk for breakfast and make it up at dinner time." They quickly got themselves ready, and the procession set out. They soon arrived at the poor, bare, miserable room with broken windows, no fire, ragged bedclothes, a sick mother, wailing baby, and a group of pale, hungry children cuddled under one old quilt, trying to keep warm. But the big eyes stared and the blue lips smiled as they girls went in. "Ach, mein Gott, it's good angels come to us," said the poor woman, crying for joy. In a few minutes, it really did seem as if the kind spirits had been at work. Hannah, who had carried the wood, made a fire and stopped up the broken panes with old hats and her own cloak. Mrs. March gave the mother tea and gruel and comforted her with the promise of help while she dressed the little baby tenderly. The girls meantime spread the tables, set the children around the fire, fed them like so many hungry birds, laughing, talking, and trying to understand the funny broken English. Das ist gut, die Engelkinder, cried the poor things as they ate there and warmed their purple hands at the comfortable blaze. The girls had never been called angel children before, and thought it was very agreeable. That was a very happy breakfast, though they didn't get any of it. And when they went away, leaving comfort behind, I think there was not any in the city for merrier people than hungry little girls who gave away their breakfast and contented themselves with bread and milk on Christmas morning. That's loving our neighbors better than ourselves, and I like it, said Meg, as they set out their presents while their mother was upstairs collecting clothes for the poor Hummels. Not a very splendid show, but there was a great deal of love done up in the few little bundles on the table. She's coming. Strike up, Beth. Open the door, Amy. 3 cheers for Marmee, cried Joe. Beth played her gayest march. Amy threw open the door, and Meg escorted Marmee to the table with great dignity. Mrs. March was both surprised and touched, and smiled with her eyes full as she examined her present and read the little notes that accompanied them. The slippers went on at once. A new handkerchief was slipped into her pocket, well scented with Amy's cologne, and the nice gloves were pronounced a perfect fit. There was a good deal of laughing and kissing and explaining in simple, loving fashion. Then all fell to work. The morning charities and ceremonies took so much time that the rest of the day was devoted to preparations for the evening festivities. Necessities being the mother of invention, the girls put their wits to work and made whatever they needed to set the stage for Joe's play. Very clever were some of their productions: pasteboard guitars, gorgeous robes of old cotton, glittering with thin spangles and armor, covered with the same useful diamond-shaped bits, left in sheets where the lids of the preserve pots from a pickle factory were cut out. The big chamber was the scene of many innocent revels. No gentlemen were admitted, so Joe played the male parts to her heart's content. She took immense satisfaction in a pair of russet leather boots given to her by a friend, which she wore in her masculine roles. Joe and Meg certainly deserved some credit for the hard work they did in learning 3 or 4 different parts, whisking in and out of the various costumes, and managing the stage besides. It was an excellent drill for their memories, and employed many hours which otherwise would have been idle, lonely, and spent in less profitable society. On Christmas night, a dozen girls piled into the bed and sat before the curtains in a most flattering state of expectancy. There was a good deal of rustling and whispering behind the curtain, and an occasional giggle from Amy. Presently a bell sounded, and the curtains flew apart, and the operatic tragedy began. A gloomy wood, according to one playbill, was represented by a few shrubs in pots, green felt on the floor, and cave in a distance, made of a clothes horse for a roof and bureau for walls. In the cave was Black Pot, with an old witch bending over it. A moment was allowed for the first thrill to subside. Then Hugo, the villain, stalked in with a clanking sword on his side, a slouching hat, a black beard, mysterious cloak, and boots. He approached the witch and requested her aid in the plot to win the heart of the beautiful Zara and do away with her love, Rodrigo. The witch agreed to help Hugo and produced 2 portions, one a poison with which to kill Rodrigo, the other a love potion to make Zara fall in love with him. After Hugo stormed off to carry out his evil scheme, the witch Sly revealed to the audience that she was plotting revenge against Hugo and intended to stop his devilish plan. Act 2 featured Don Pedro, Zara's father, ordering Rodrigo to stop pursuing his daughter, for he was penniless and had nothing to offer. When the 2 young lovers defied his wishes, he had them both thrown into the dungeon, where Hugo attempted to carry out his plan. The witch was to deliver the potions to a couple in prison. But she switched Hugo's cup for Rodrigo's, and Hugo died a dramatic death, made all the more serious by the song of the choir. The actors performed their multiple roles with such skill and flair that all but the most critical audience would have been impressed by the final effect. when the tower, a masterpiece of carpentry, hastily erected, between acts and came toppling down upon the hero and his love. The actors took no time in disentangling themselves and carried on as if the small disaster had been part of the play. In the end, Roderigo and Czar were united, and all the players joined in a joyful chorus as the curtain fell upon the happy scene. Thunderous applause followed, but it unexpectedly interrupted when the cot bed suddenly shut up and extinguished the enthusiastic audience. The actors flew to the rescue, and all were taken out unhurt, though many were speechless with laughter. The excitement had hardly subsided when Hannah appeared offering Mrs. March's compliments, and would the ladies walk down to supper. This was a surprise even to the actors when they saw that the table that looked at one another in rapturous amazement. It was like Marmee to get a little treat for them, but anything so fine to this was unheard of since it was the departed days of plenty. There was ice cream, actually 2 dishes of it, pink and white, and cake and fruit and distracting French bonbons, and in the middle of the table 4 great bouquets of flowers. It took quite their breath away, and they started first at the table, and then their mother, who looked as if she enjoyed it immensely. Is it fairies? Santa Claus? Mother did it. Aunt March had a good fit and sent supper? All wrong. Old Mr. Lawrence sent it. The Lawrence boy's grandfather. What in the world put such a thing in his head? We don't know him. Hannah told one of the servants about your breakfast party, and that pleased him. He knew my father years ago, and he sent me a polite note this afternoon saying he hoped that I would allow him to express his friendly feeling towards my children by sending them a few treats in honor of the day. I could not refuse, and so you have a little feast tonight to make up for the bread and milk breakfast. That boy put it in his head. I know it. He did. He is a capital fellow, and I wish he could get acquainted. He looks as if he liked to know us, but he's bashful, and Meg is so prim she won't let me speak to him when he passed," said Joe as the plates went round and the ice began to melt out of sight and oohs and ahs of satisfaction. "You mean the people who live in the big house next door, don't you?" asked one of the girls. "My mother knows old Mr. Lawrence, but says he's very proud and doesn't like to mix with his neighbors. He keeps his grandson shut up when he isn't riding and walking with his tutor, and makes him study very hard. We invited him to our party, but he didn't come. Mother says he's very nice, though, and never speaks to us girls. Our cat ran away once, and he brought her back. He talked over the fence, and we were getting on capitally about cricket and so on when he saw Meg coming and walked off. I mean, I know him someday for he needs fun. I'm sure he does," said Joe decidedly. "He looks like a little gentleman, so I've no objection to your knowing him, if a proper opportunity comes," said Mrs. March. "He brought the flowers himself, and I should have asked him if he had been sure what was going on upstairs. He looked so wistful as he went away, hearing the frolic and evidently having none of his own." "It's a mercy you didn't, Mother," said Joe, or laughed Joe, looking at her boots. "We'll have put a play on sometime that he can see. Perhaps he'll help act. Wouldn't that be jolly?" "I've never had such a fine bouquet before. How pretty it is," said Meg. "I wish I could send my bunch to Father. I'm afraid he isn't having such a Merry Christmas," said Beth softly.